It's time for another Dice Tower review with Robert Geistlinger.
The world as we know it has come to an end. All that's left of it is one woman who is referred to as the Queen. And her only real happy memory of the past is of this beautiful garden. Well, all the organics are gone from the planet, so she collects up these robots and decides to use them to help her build a garden. In the process, she creates robotnists. Today, we're taking a look at The Last Garden. So here we're taking a look at The Last Garden. Now this is a worker placement style game for 2 to 4 players, where the players are going to be programming robots that are trying to recreate a garden for the last woman on Earth, who is simply known as the Queen. At the end of the game, the player with the most favor cogs in their possession will be the winner. The game is played over a number of rounds, depending on player count, and each round consists of 4 steps. Now the first step in the game is to actually build the garden itself. In this phase, each player is going to take turns playing a program card from their hand, and then they're going to place one of their worker robotnists out onto the board. Now this must be done in that order. Now there are 3 different types of program cards. You have place, move, and spin. When playing a card, the die value in the corner is going to determine which sectors we can play out onto the board, because we're only going to be able to play into sectors that have a die value equal to that current value on the card, unless there are no dice out there that match it, in which case that will become wild. The place card allows us to choose a gem of any color from the supply and add it to a sector matching this. So we have a value 1 on a place, so we could maybe take, let's say, a red gem and add it to this one that has a value of 1. The move card allows us to take a gem from a matching sector on the board and move it to any other spot. So if we played this move with a value of 3, we could take, say, this green gem here, and maybe we move it over to this sector 5. The spin card allows us to take the value of a matching die and move it up or down by 1, and the 1 and 6 do connect, so a 6 can become a 1 and vice versa. But in this case, we have a value of 5, so we could turn, say, this into a 6. After playing a program card and then applying its effects, the player is then going to take one of their robotnists and place it out onto the board. There are 4 possible location types, being the mines, the lab, the workshop, and the garden itself. Now I'm only going to give a brief overview of these because some of these will make more sense in the later scoring phase. The first place is the garden itself, and to do so you simply place a robotanist out into a sector, and only one robotanist can be in each sector, and that will give you control of that particular piece of the garden. The second place is the mines here, which has 3 locations that you can go to, and those are going to equate to a color gem. So I could place here, and that means that I have control of the blue. And that's going to allow us to possibly get some favor cogs at the end of the round. The third location is the workshop. Here there are going to be 3 rows of spaces that we could place a worker robotanist anywhere into, which is going to give us control of a sector die value. So I could place here, which will give me control of the value 2 on this line. Most likely I would probably go there. And then I could go here, which is going to give me control of the 4 on this particular line. And I'll explain that a little better later during the scoring phase. The final location that a player can place one of their robotanists into is the lab. When placing in there, you're going to go into the first available spot, and that's going to allow you to take one of these program boosts if available. Now, if there isn't anything there, you can't go there. You can only have one of these in your possession at a time, but they do last from round to round if you don't use them. So if I go here, I could take this one and now keep it next to my player area. Now these program boosts can be played when we're playing our program cards in the game, and they just allow us to do one of 3 things. The 3 types of program boosts that we have available are the first one here, which allows us to change an action. So if we're playing this spin card, instead of doing a spin, we could do a move or a place with this value. The next one we have here allows us to place move a gem times 2. So when we're doing the place or move, we actually can do 2 gems instead of 1. And then the final one here, which is a place move gem multi, which allows us to, let's say we're playing something that affects a sector 6. Instead, we could do all all sectors that match that value 6. Now there is one other free action that can be taken by the player who currently holds the Queen's favor tile, and that allows that player to place one gem of any color into any sector as a free action, and then they flip it over to show they've used it for this round. After every player has placed their last robotanist, then we move into the second step, which is to release the lab robots. So any players that have in this lab area, in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, will get to remove that robot from the lab and place it anywhere out on the board that could gain them favor cogs. So in this case, the blue player could pick this up, and let's say they decide to place it here. After the lab is empty, then we will move to the step 3, where we will gain favor cogs from the Queen. Now scoring happens in a specific order, and it must happen in this order. And the first thing we're going to do is check for wilting from the workshop area. In doing so, we're going to look for any area that has 6 or more gems out in the garden, such as this area here. And all of those gems are going to be removed from the garden. But if you control a sector die over here that matches, and we do, this is a 6 and this is a 6, we're going to gain 3 favor cogs for doing so. Next, we're going to check the 1-to-1 and 2-to-1 ratios based on who controls these dice. So we only have the pink player here who controls the 3. So we look out here and we see that there is a 1 sector with a 3, and it has 3 in it. So at a 1-to-1 ratio, that person would gain 3 favor cogs. Now, if they had been in this section, they would actually get a 2-to-1 ratio for it, rounded up. So they would only get, it has 3, it would round to 4, they would gain only 2 favor cogs. Next, we'll check the garden itself, and we'll just go in order of each player. They will get 1 point for every gem currently in their garden. So looking here, the blue player would get 2 points, pink would get 1, 3 points to pink here. This one, because it wilted, is going to get nothing. Now last up, we're going to have the mines, which is scored in a first, second, or third. And so we'll check each color. So no one went to red. Green has the most out on this board. I did remove 1 red to make this a little easier for us to see. For scoring, for ties, you just add in the 2 places. But so the blue player is second. They would get 3 points, and the pink has the green, which is top, and they would get 5 points. After scoring is complete, we'll do an end of round phase, which each player returning back all of the any cards that they have in their possession. At the end of each round, you do still have 1 unused card. A new hand will be dealt to each player. Each player will then collect up their robotanists from the board. The gems and the die values will not change. The Queen token will be passed to the left, and you will begin a new round. Play will continue like this until the final round for the number of players is completed, and at that point, whoever has the most favor cogs is the winner. So let's look at The Last Garden. Now this game had me pretty intrigued based on theme alone. I like the idea of these robots, and it's the end of the world, and they're trying to build this beautiful garden out of, well, the things they can find, and they're robotanists. And that had me pretty well hooked into giving this game a try. But beyond that, I was also pretty interested in the gameplay itself, because I typically do love worker placement games, and especially if you add in a little bit of area control, and the game has a bit of a programming aspect, and a little bit of a betting aspect, and even some take that, and I like the way all of that worked together. Now, I did find the game took probably a full round to really cohesively come together in my mind, because you do need to not only worry about how you're going to play out your cards and how you're going to manipulate the board, but you also need to think about how your opponents are going to manipulate the board. And as you see them put workers down, you'll start to get a clear idea. But because the rounds are so short, then you have to make those decisions quickly. Now, one thing that I really did enjoy in the game was the lab locations. Because yes, you get a program boost that you get to add, and that's all well and good, and I'll touch that in a second. But I liked how it creates this extra sort of half action that you get at the end of the round, in that once the board has fully been manipulated for that round, any workers that you have in that lab get to be released, and you get to put them in basically their most optimal position for scoring. And I really enjoyed the way that worked out in the game. Now, the program boost tiles themselves were probably one of my least favorites in the game. It's not that anything's wrong with them. They work. They just were a little bland for me. There's only 3 of them in the box, and I really think that what I would have liked to have seen is just more of them and maybe a random sampling in them, just to kind of add a little spice from round to round. But they work. Again, the symbology on them is okay. It takes a bit to get used to, but I just would have liked to have seen a little more variety in those tiles. As to the artwork in the game, I really like it. It's not over the top. It suits the theme. It flows really well. It has this robot and organic and inorganic sort of feeling to it that just seems to flow really well. As to the components in the game, this is something I loved in the game, because they could have just as easily made those big bright colored gems cubes, and it would have played the same, but it would have had the presence. And those meeples could have just been basic meeples, but they took the time to have custom robot meeples that are differently shaped for each player. And it's those little extra touches that really help a game come together, and really did here as well. Now, as to player count, the game plays 2, 3, and 4, and it's just a minor tweak for each one. 3 and 4, each player basically gets one turn or one round where they're going to be the first player. And in a 2-player game, each player in the game will get 2 rounds where they will be first player. Now, at 3 and 4, the game largely played the same for me. 2 players also played about the same, but I found it was my least favorite way to play the game. It's not that anything's wrong with it, and the game basically plays the same way. It's just that I didn't feel as limited in my choices. Now, even in a 4-player game, you don't feel completely limited on the board, except maybe in those garden spaces. But there is plenty of places to go to, despite the fact that this board is fairly small. 3 players for me did seem the sweet spot where I enjoyed the game the most. Now, one thing I would have liked to have seen in this game is player aids. It's not a make or break thing. It didn't make me dislike the game. It didn't even make me knock any points off my scoring. It's just the first time I played it, I would have liked to have had player aids to refer to, just to tell me an explanation of what the 3 cards are, or card types rather, and just to give me the general flow of a round, because there are those 4 steps. Now, there isn't a lot to remember in the game, but I just found I would have liked player aids. Again, it's not a make or break. You could easily make one for yourself. I'm just not a big fan of going to the rulebook as many times as we did in our first play. The scoring round of the game was probably my most favorite thing in this, only because it kept giving me a feeling of another game that's not like this game, but I don't know how to explain how it kept giving me the exact same feeling. It kept giving the same feeling as Camel Up. Just in the scoring of it and resolving how the board had manipulated out throughout that round, and then getting a return on where my workers are gone. It just gave me the same sense of satisfaction that I felt when doing a scoring round in Camel Up. So I really, really like that. And one thing I liked is that the scoring stayed pretty tight in this game. In the first round, I believe the first game we played, the first round, all players ended with the same points. But by the end of the second round, the scores had started to drift. Overall, as far as this game goes, I really enjoyed the interesting theme of it. I enjoyed the use of these familiar mechanisms in this cohesive fashion with a really nice table presence that really did work for me. And everything in the game was simple to learn. Now, there was the one thing I had with the AP, in that I did find some players had AP problems, and the game does nothing to solve that. But again, the rounds go so fast, it's just not that huge of a deal. It's not make or break. But I liked the familiar use of mechanisms. I liked this interesting theme. I liked how some of the manipulations with the dice and the gems stayed from round to round. And I liked how this game just felt, it gave me the same feeling as, say, Camel Up or Lords of Waterdeep, but in a game that plays quick and doesn't overstay its welcome at the table. I hope you've enjoyed this look at The Last Garden, and it's helped you decide if this is something you might want to take a look at for you and your game group, and I look forward to seeing you folks next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.